Hi, good evening, and welcome to my 20th episode of my series on paranormal and supernatural events that have happened to me in my life at 70. These are just the bigger ones. There are lots of little things that happen still to this day. And I wanted to point out that this picture right here was painted by my mom. She was quite a good artist in high school and eventually got back to it when she was older. So very good painting and very sweet memory. All right, so I promised that I would tell you about the spirits that I met in Ecuador. After my husband passed away in December of 2010, we had been talking about before he died, when there was a moment where we thought maybe he would get better. He had a squamous cell carcinoma and a big lump on the side of his neck, which they ended up killing eventually with radiation and chemo, but it spread to different parts of his body, so he didn't stay with us in this life. But we had been talking about my daughter, my oldest daughter, I have two girls and a boy, was saying that she wanted to go to Ecuador because there was a place called Vilcabamba, and there was a guy there and his wife, and they were doing this raw food thing, and she was into that at the time. And I'd done a lot of traveling in South America, but I'd never been to Ecuador, so I was down and for that. And my husband, who was still alive at that time, he had actually traveled to Colombia in 1973 with his first wife, and I was actually in Peru with my mom at the same time. I was in Peru, Mother's Day. He was there for Mother's Day. It was Mother's Day in Peru. And I was there with my mom. She was a travel agent, and so was I at that point in time. Even though I was only 17, I was working in her office. And so Ecuador sounded like a good idea. And we were talking about taking a family trip down there and perhaps moving there. But at that time it was mostly a trip thing in terms of my husband. And then he ended up passing away in December of 2010, as I said. And so the next spring, I had itchy feet, and we were then talking about moving there. But my daughter, none of my kids could go with me, especially my oldest daughter, because she had a child to take care of, and he, at the time, could not leave the country because his father, who was never around, was scared we'd go to Ecuador and not come back. So I went by myself, and my daughter found a lady online whose name was Sarah, and she was an American lady. She was a nurse, and I'm a nursing assistant, so that was great. And she was married. She'd been in the Peace Corps in Ecuador and met an Ecuadorian guy in the Ecuadorian military. And so she was there living in Ecuador, and she had a big property, and she had rental houses on it by this time, and she had 3 girls. They were similar in age to my kids, a little younger, but similar ages. And so I arranged for her, Sarah, to meet me. I was staying in a hotel in Quito, and she was to come. I was going to arrive in the evening one day, and she would come the next day. And I wanted her to sort of give me a tour of the area, and I wanted to look at hospitals, and I wanted to look at schools, Montessori schools for my grandson, and just kind of look at it and feel it and see if that would be some place that I would actually be interested in moving to. Although living in a big city has never been my goal. I'm more of a suburb person, always have been. And I like it. I don't really like living in the city, but I kind of do now, but it's not the same. It's not like a big city or something. Anyway, so I went down to visit her to Ecuador, to Quito. It was just a 10-day trip, I think. And one of the places that my daughter was interested in was Vilcabamba. And there's a expat community in Vilcabamba, and even people from other countries. I know a guy who lives there still, and with his girlfriend, and he's from Australia originally. So I flew down there, and indeed I got a taxi and went to the hotel, and the next morning Sarah came to pick me up and take me on a tour, which she did, and I hung out with her for, I mean, a week, I think, close to like five days maybe. And then I wanted to see Vilcabamba, even though I would not be able to stay there. I just wanted to go and see what it felt like and see what the little town was like and stuff. So I flew to a city in the mountains, lower mountains than where Quito is. Quito's at like 9,000 feet or something like that. And Cuenca's is in the mountains still. And a lot of Americans live in Cuenca as well. So I flew to Cuenca. And I stayed in some little boutique hotel, which I went and looked for recently, and I could not find it. I don't know if it's no longer a hotel or if it changed names or what, but it's not there. And it was an old building that had been a wealthy family's house, and it was on the cobblestone streets of old Cuenca. And it was quite old. It was probably 150 years old, this house. So I stayed there for 2 nights, and the room had an outside window, and then it had inside windows, and there was a staircase on the other side of the windows. And every night when I tried to those 2 nights when I tried to go to sleep, I couldn't. I felt like something was watching me. And somebody was staring at me, and I tossed and turned and would look, and then finally the second night I realized that there was the spirit of an indigenous man standing in the corner of the room. There was a door, and then there was the corner, and he was standing there. And the indigenous people even today wear fedora hats and something Mexicans call a serape. I forgot what the Ecuadorians call it, but you know, they wear sandals and whatever. So this man looked like that, and he was the one that was staring at me. He was just standing there. He didn't move, but he was making me highly uncomfortable. So in the middle of the second night, I got up, walked over to the door, and said in broken Spanish, "Señor, you are not welcome here. You have to leave." And I opened the door, and he was gone. So did he actually walk out the door? I didn't see him do that, but he did leave, because I guess he didn't, I don't know if he didn't know he must have not thought I could see him or something. I don't know. But then I slept better, because that was just horrific. And then that day, after that, I took a bus to Vilcabamba. And that's a long bus ride. That is probably a 7 or 8 hour bus ride. And you have to go up through the mountains, and you go to another smaller town called Loja. And then Loja is about a half an hour's drive on another road down to Vilcabamba. So I basically got up early, rode in this bus for most of the day, or half the day into the afternoon at some point, and got off the bus in Vilcabamba, walked around, looked at the state of the town, and I couldn't see what people thought was so wonderful. I mean, it was kind of very little, very small. It had church, of course, derelict, paint peeling off the walls, and there were some obvious signs of foreign influence, like really nice football bars and things like that, or nice, but definitely European or American, not Ecuadorian, and there were other places, but it was just I didn't get the vibe that was someplace that I really wanted to be, but I really wanted to go see it because my daughter really was curious. And so then I didn't have but maybe an hour, and the bus to go back to Cuenca was leaving, so I really didn't get to stay there very long, but I did accomplish my mission. And then I had to ride all the way back on the bus, and that took another 7 hours, but it was faster because there weren't a lot of stops, because it was later in the evening, and I don't think we got back until close to midnight. And then the next day I got on a plane and flew back to Quito, and from there the next day I went to the airport and came back home. But I had accomplished what I wanted to do on that trip, and so I thought that Ecuador was a possibility. So that's the first spirit. And then that was 2011. And then in 2012, just before, in like end of October, or in October, I went back to Ecuador. And this time, Sarah, the lady who'd met me, she had a beautiful maybe acre of land up on a ridge looking down on this little town called Conocoto, which is outside of the north end of Quito. And so I thinking that I wanted my family to come down, I took my son and one of his friends so that he would be able to get to know Ecuador and make a decision whether he wanted to live there or not as well. So it was my plan, to get all the kids in line to come with me. So my son and his friend Stephen went with me, and in that Sarah had a studio, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom house. She had a big house where, like a big 4-bedroom house that her family lived in. It was all gated, and so she had finished the 3-bedroom house because we were coming and we needed a 3-bedroom house. We moved in. Everything was fine. We were having a great time, going on adventures. We went down to the coast. We went out to Otavalo. You take buses everywhere when you're there. And towards the end of our stay, and we were there for about 2 months, we came back in early December. One night, I went to sleep and woke up towards morning, and there was what looked like an Inca, like an old style Inca warrior, like 1500s kind of thing, bare chested, something. I want to say a loincloth. It probably wasn't an animal. It might have been maybe just cloth, because they had weaving even then. Funny little short feathers, not like American Indians where you see this array, but just like sticking up. And he woke me up because he was screaming at me, like bent over me and screaming, and not like I'm gonna kill you, but like, get out of here. And I'm like, this is a brand new house. Of course, the land is ancient, and apparently he was there and they didn't know it, I guess. But he's screaming in my ear. He wants me to go. And I'm like, ah. And so I sat up, and then he was gone. And I was just like, what the heck? Well, obviously he wants me to leave, but obviously I'm not going to. And I never saw him again. However, there's one other funny thing that happened in that house, and that was that at night, after, it was like 3 levels. There was the bottom level, which was a living room, kitchen, and then there were like 5 steps to a level where there was a bedroom, bathroom, master bedroom and bathroom, and then you turned and went up the stairs, and there were 2 bedrooms on the top story. So the boys each had a bedroom, and then I had a bedroom. And so the house would be quiet, everybody would be asleep. I'm settling down to go to sleep, and I would hear splat, as though a pile of papers fell on the floor. So I get up and I go downstairs expecting to find something. I'm like, how could that have happened? But I go down there, I can't find anything on the floor. Nothing's on the floor. And that happened over and over again, to the point where I just ignored it after a while, because there's no point in me getting up, because I knew that there wasn't any paper there. Then we came back to Ecuador finally in 2017. My daughter and my grandson, by that time, my grandson was able to come with us. And so we went back with the intention of living in Ecuador. And we rented a house from my friend Sarah, and we stayed up there for a few months, and then three or four. And then we moved down to the beach because I wanted to be next to the ocean. So we moved from Conocoto down to Salinas and rented a house down there. And my daughter, we're living in this house, and there's not much in it because I'm thinking I'm going to be shipping my furniture down there. And so we just bought box springs or mattresses and a table and chairs and maybe some shelves to put things in. But the house was a big 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, and it was mostly empty. So my daughter and grandson had rooms upstairs again, and I had a room downstairs. And my daughter comes to me and she goes, "Mom, it's the weirdest thing. There is, I keep hearing papers fall in the hallway outside my bedroom." I'm like, huh, well, that's weird. And our little dog she's got a video of our little dog sitting and looking, and he's hearing the commotion and everything. Papers falling, and that happened to her several times. That didn't happen to me that time, but then we were talking about it recently, and we said, hey, I wonder if the entity that was on Sarah's property followed us down to the beach, because it was the same phenomena, but nothing was there. I don't know. What do you think? Please leave your comments. Please like and subscribe. That will help the channel. I'm going to, this is the end. I've got 20 videos on paranormal, supernatural things from my life, and I'm going to move on to other things, other subjects, and but I'll let you know if anything else happens, if there's any more videos from outdoors that have unusual things on them. If anything unusual happens more to me, I will let you know. It seems to have kind of died down. I don't have a lot of things that happen here. I had a little pot of the stuff called lip medics, and a few years ago, and I set it on the corner of my bedside table, and I came back upstairs to get it, and it was gone. And I crawled around the floor looking for it, and it wasn't in the drawer, it wasn't anywhere. I couldn't figure out what happened to it. And I kept coming back and looking because I knew where I'd left it. And several weeks later, maybe several months later, I think actually, I walked upstairs one day, and there was that little pot of lip medics right where I'd left it months before. I don't know. And then the other thing that happened here, other than that, nothing happens in this house. It's very quiet. There doesn't seem to be anything supernatural here regularly. But I was in the dining area of my kitchen, and sitting with a friend who'd come to visit, and we were talking about, I think my grandson's father or something, and there's a picture in the hallway that was a cross stitch that my Aunt Joanna had done when she was in her teens or 20s, and it's on a wire, a picture wire, and just your usual, hook. And we're sitting there talking, and something fell on the floor in the hallway. I thought, that's weird. We're just sitting there. There's nobody else in the house, right? And I thought, and it couldn't have been a cat because it was way up high and on the wall. And I found that picture on the floor. And so I thought, oh, well, the picture wire must have broken. No. And the only way for that picture to come off the wall was if it was lifted up and then dropped, because there's no way it could come off by itself, and there's no way that it would, because picture wire is very bendy and you have to really lift up high for it to come off. So that's the only other thing that I can think of that happened in this house. But that's good. I don't want things happening in my house. Well, it's okay that they happen outside, but not in my house. So thank you very much for listening to my stories, and it makes me really happy, and I like doing this. So please ask me questions, make comments, leave kindly comments, please, and I will see you on the next episode, the next video. Bye.